for introducing Representative Edwards. And so since this is about telling us about your life, you kind of get to do that anyway. But Representative Edwards and I have the distinction of both growing up in the Edgemont 8th Ward in Provo, Utah. And so, it's an honor to have her back. She has served for how many years now? Six, and from Davis County in the Utah legislature as a Republican. And we are honored to have her, and so we've tried to get people from different walks of life, and this is the Legislative Public Service Day that you're feeling, Becky, today. And so we are honored to have Representative Edwards here, and we're going to turn the time over to her. Thank you.
And my father was a professor at BYU teaching child development, and I grew up feeling like BYU was my backyard and spent so much time here as a kid, lots of time bowling at the Wilkinson Center and swimming at the old Deseret Towers. So these were good times back in the day. And of course went to BYU myself and have had 4 children at BYU. 3 have graduated, and my youngest daughter is coming home from her mission in Tokyo in 15 days. So that's very exciting. I want to start out with me as an 8th grader. Now, I only wish that I was more of a pack rat, or my mom was, and had some of my old election posters from this time saved, because here I am, right here. This was an Old West theme of Fair Junior High at the time in 1973, 41 years ago. But here I am, 8th grade officer. And at the time when I ran this first election I ever won, my election theme was Becky Price is nice. And you know what? It worked. I rode that for several years in junior high and all the way through high school. Becky Price is nice. That seemed to resonate with people. But today's lecture is going to be about how you get from that to, this is one of my campaign signs from this legislative world, representation for real. So the title of today's lecture really should be From Becky Price is Nice to Representation for Real, and how, what that journey has been like in my personal life, and how, if you ever desire, you could engage in the same kind of experience in your own life. How many of you have ever run for office before? Junior high, high school, okay? How many of you have won your office? Oh, what a room of successful individuals. That's awesome. In 2008, so I can talk a little bit about my journey of getting into the legislature and what made me want to run, first of all, what the experience was like running, and then a little bit of what I've learned through the process, okay? So first of all, we have the decision to run, and then we have the race itself, and then we have the first legislative session. So the first part of this lecture is going to be sort of like a year in the life, okay? It all started in 2007. 2007, there was a lot happening in the Utah State Legislature in regards to education. And this was something, there were some decisions made by legislators where they had voted in and passed some legislation that I was really upset about, as were many voters. And on the ballot in 2007, there was, now I forget what it's called, when the voters rise up and they repeal a bill that has been passed. An initiative, thank you, wow. Anyway, so that happened in 2007, and there was a lot of activity surrounding this issue, and a lot of people on both sides of the issue. And my particular legislator in my area had voted opposite of how I thought he should have voted. And so I was fairly exercised over this issue and spent a lot of time whining and complaining at the dinner table. So my children, who have very low tolerance for my whining, because really dinner table is the chance for them to whine and complain and, you know, take up all that airspace, finally said to me, Mom, why don't you actually just do something about this? We're tired of hearing you complain. And I realized that was stuff that I had actually told them for years in their own life, and that probably that was something that I should take to heart. But I had no idea how to go about running for office. How could I possibly make a difference, even though I was involved in this initiative process to try and repeal this bill? Anyway, so fast forward to February 2008. I got an email, and it was from someone that I didn't even know, and they said, hey, we're getting together, just a group of people, to talk about education issues, and is this something you might be interested in coming to? Well, I didn't know this person. I didn't know any of the other people who were being invited, but an opportunity to talk about education, yeah, I was there. So I said yes, I went. I didn't know anyone who was at the meeting, and sat and talked, and finally one of them turned to me and said, have you ever thought about running for office? And instinctively out of my mouth I said, oh, absolutely, I'd love to do it, but I would never ever win. I could never win. And they said, well, you think about it. And there was another person there who also, there was neither seat, let's see, there was an open seat in the state Senate, and then this was an incumbent who was seated in the House. But there was a movement to try and unseat both of these. I mean, to fill the open Senate seat and then to unseat the incumbent. So as I left the meeting with this other individual, and she turned to me and said, which one do you want to run for, the House or the Senate? And I'm like, oh, I don't care, I'm never winning. You choose what you want, and I'll run for the other one. So she chose the open Senate seat, and I said, fine, I'll run for the House, I don't care, it's fine. They're all the same, what will it matter? And so went home, and at that point I thought, wait, do I really want to do this, and am I really in it to win it? Because who wants to run and lose? Nobody. If you're going to do it, you want to make sure that you win, right? So anyway, I call my husband and say, what do you think about this? And he's like, oh, sounds great, let's do it. You know, let's do it. Yeah, you go ahead, put your name on the ballot. Let's see if this can happen. Anyway, and talked to my kids, and they were all over it. They thought it sounded great. I think they sort of thought it would be like just like running for student body office at the high school, and that's sort of what they thought it would be like. And anyway, and of course we know it's much more than that, but that's kind of how the decision was made. Kind of an opportunity opened up, and someone asked me. And that research has shown, since I've been elected, I've looked at a lot of research, and it's specifically on women in running for elected office. And studies show that most women, and the majority of men also, but it's like 80% of women and 59% of men, decide that they will run for public office after they have been asked to run or invited to run. And so I always make it, at this point in my presentations, make it a point to say, all of you, consider this your ask. Consider this, that someday when you run for public office, you think back, what was the first time I really thought about that? I know, it was in that Kennedy Center lecture back when I was in college. That's the first time I really thought about it. And remember that this will serve as your ask, your official time when someone invited you and said, you can do this. All right, so that's how the decision was made. And then we went on to run a race. How many of you are familiar with the caucus convention system that we have in Utah? Okay, most of you. So this is where you have a caucus night, and your neighbors go together and they elect delegates, and then those delegates go to either the county or state convention. And if you receive 40% of the votes, let's see, then you're on the ballot. If you receive 60% of those delegate votes, then you are the automatic party nominee. So just the odds are not in your favor in this when you're running against an incumbent. In fact, only 7% of incumbents are not reelected. I did not know this when I so flippantly decided, sure, I'll run. I didn't realize that it would be such an uphill battle. But we worked hard. we had a group of delegates that I met with personally in their living rooms. Some we met at restaurants, some in their houses, some at my house. Anyway, variety of different locations, and tried to get to know them and what their issues were. And the day of the convention came, and I knew I needed a certain number of votes. I think it was like 35 votes, because there were some, I think there were 60 or 70 delegates. Anyway, gave our speeches, they voted, they come back and they announce the votes, and literally I make it over the 40% threshold by one vote. Literally. I don't know who that one vote is, but if I knew who it was, I would give them a hug, because that right there provided the opportunity to move on to a primary. So now we're in a primary race between the incumbent and myself. And this is really where things started to heat up, because it was kind of interesting. In every single race that I have run in, that I've had a Republican opponent during a primary, that Republican opponent has literally been in my LDS stake. And my Democrat has been in the LDS, my same stake. And this is out of a city of like a district of 40,000 people. It's just weird, right? That these same people are in literally the next ward to me. Anyway, that was the case. My Republican opponent in my primary was in the ward right next to me, and so was the Democrat. And anyway, this is where, you know how farmers always want to have a bunch of kids because they can work on the farm, right? Isn't that how it works? People who run for political office want to have a bunch of kids, and you want to know why? Because they can go out and campaign for them. And this is so true. So this election cycle, my very first time, I had a daughter who was in 8th grade. She's a missionary now. I had a daughter who just graduated from high school, or was in the middle of graduating from high school, and a son who got home from his mission like 2 weeks before. So this was perfect. He'd just spent the last 2 years knocking on doors. This was great. He just didn't even have to wear a suit. Just throw on a Becky t-shirt. He was good to go. Already knew the routine. The high school daughter decided she hated knocking on doors. She did not like that at all. And she said, "Isn't there anything I can do, Mom? I hate this. I don't want to knock on doors. I don't want to talk to people." And I said, "Yeah, be in charge. Tell everyone else where to go, what to do, make up the routes, you know." And she said, "Okay, what's my title?" I'm like, "That's called being my campaign manager." And so my 18-year-old ran my campaign. And I paid my 8th grade daughter 25 cents for every lawn sign she could place. She and her little friends ran up and down the streets. You know, "Can we put a sign in your yard for my mom?" And it's real hard for people to say no to an 8th grade little girl, especially if she told them she was making 25 cents on that. I'm not sure if that's against ethics laws, but anyway. So it was an awesome experience from my point of view, because mostly as a parent, your life and your experiences revolve around your children to a great extent, right? Think about in your own life. Your parents are there to support you. They're there to nurture you. They're there to help prop you up when you have failures, help you do whatever. And I'm sure all of you have parents who have spent a great majority of their life doing that for you. But probably the shoe has not been on the other foot that frequently in your own lives towards your own parents. But in this case, it was. And it was awesome, because for really the first time in this way, my kids were able to kind of step up and say, "Oh, we get to help you. This is great." And they loved it. They loved to get out there and knock on doors. And it was really a great experience for our whole family in a very grassroots way. Knocking doors on neighborhoods, putting up signs, doing all the really grassroots things. Anyway, fast forward to the final election day, and we had a trip planned, an extended family trip to California. And so we thought, okay, we'll fly out right after the polls close, and we'll fly to California. I hadn't even thought about who's going to pick up all my signs. I mean, I didn't even think that far ahead. So we got on the airplane, and I remember so distinctly sitting there in one of those little sandwich shops at the airport, checking on the poll results, and I was ahead 11 votes to 8 votes before we got on the plane. And I'm like, well, I've already won. It's perfect. Even if I lose, at one point in this election, I was ahead. So I felt pretty satisfied. We get on the plane, we land in LA, and my son with his phone is like, you know, searching, waiting for the little spin to go around, and finally the results come up, and he shows me the phone, and we had won 52 to 47. It was amazing. Maybe it was even, this was in the primary, okay? And there was a lot of screaming. We're still on the tarmac. Everyone in the airplane is like, what is going on? And my husband stands up. He's like, my wife just made the legislature. And I'm like, no, that was the primary. Sit down. There's a whole other election going on. Anyway, it was unbelievably exciting. And we got off the plane, and people started calling. And the thing that was fun is that my kids, all of their friends, had an incredible amount of ownership on this. No one called and said, oh, you won the election, that's really great for you. We had, you know, teenagers and college kids calling and saying, we won, and just the excitement and the vision of that could be a possibility for them someday was worth the whole experience, really. It was fun to see that. So anyway, and this is Davis County we're talking. We haven't elected a Democrat in Davis County for like 25 years. So after you make it through the primary, you're a tiny bit smooth sailing in Davis County, and you still get out and work, but the pressure's off. So we still did, you know, lawn signs and walking neighborhoods and all of that kind of stuff in the general election as well, and ended up, you know, winning in the general election by quite a big margin, again, because it's primarily Davis County is primarily Republican. And then so that's November. Now the legislative session starts in 3 months. This, just to give you a little background on the state legislature in Utah, we're part-time legislature. There are 104 people in the body. 75 are in the House, that's where I serve, and 29 in the Senate. Our legislative session lasts for 45 days, and that's pretty much full-time, and then increasingly insane as the schedule goes on and we move towards the end of the session. It just gets more and more intense. And we basically do 2 things in the Utah State Legislature. One, during that 45-day period, we pass about 450 bills. Usually when I have like a little Boy Scout group and I ask them how many bills they think we pass, it's like 12 or 25 or something, but it's 450, and we debate and listen to almost 1,000 bills. So that just the volume of material that you're expected to read, understand, digest, and then vote on is really monumental. That's the first thing we do, is we're passing laws. Second thing we do is make the state budget. So the state budget in Utah is about $13.5 billion, and a lot of that is set already in certain little pots. We have a general education pot, and we have a general fund. So we have 2 kind of pots for the revenue to go in, and there's a lot of discussion about that, and always the needs are bigger than the amount of money that we have, of course. But those are the 2 main things that we do as a legislature. During the remainder of the year, we have interim, that's called the interim period, from the end of the legislative session around the rest of the year until when it begins again. So we're in interim right now, and we have once a month meetings where we serve on committees, and then we also have a lot of meetings and different committees that we sit on that happen not during those once a month meetings. So it probably during the regular year, during the interim, is probably about 15 or 20 hours a week. And then obviously during the legislative session, those 45 days, it's full time. And we're discussing everything from criminal justice, transportation, public ed, higher ed, revenue and taxation, anything that the state government fingers touch, we discuss it. And usually a legislator sits on 2 committees, standing committees that make the laws, and then an appropriations committee, and that's where the budget is made. So for the past 2 years, so I've served for 6 years. For the past 2 years, I've served on the Natural Resources, Agriculture and Environment Committee. That's all one committee. And then I've been the chair of Economic Development and Workforce Services Committee. And then for appropriations, higher education. So, and of course, you know, the state doesn't fund anything with BYU, but one of our big concerns in higher ed, obviously, is kids just like you who go to the 8 state institutions, state-funded institutions here in Utah. So you are discussed, people like you, kids just like you are being discussed extensively in the state legislature in that committee. Anyway, so those are the types of committees that you sit on, every legislator 2 standing and one appropriations committee. So that's kind of takes us to, let's see, what I have learned. Oh, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the races. So that was my first election. My second election, and maybe I should tell you a little bit about my background too. Sorry, I forgot about that. Let's go back to when I was at BYU. I majored in education and then got a master's degree in social work and a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And so now when the College of Social Work outreaches and says, you know, we're doing a survey on all of our graduates and what kind of things are you involved with now, none of their options are what I'm doing. None of their options are, I'm an elected official, and so I always, you know, under other, have to write that down. Because I think there probably is not an expectation that that would be the background for someone going into elected office. But I'll tell you, that's one of the beauties of the Utah State Legislature is much like in the church where we have a lay clergy and you can have, you know, a professor or a plumber or an attorney as your bishop, and now I can see my analogy is going to fall down with my next sentence. The spirit is there and the mantle, and they will do, you know that they are called and they can be great in those callings. The legislature is full of people who have varying backgrounds, and all of those backgrounds really help enrich and broaden the discussion. And so for me, this was one of the main concerns I had when I first decided to run. I thought, well, surely I should have majored in political science. Maybe I needed to be an attorney. Maybe those are more the normal trajectories for this elected official pathway. And it turns out that my background is actually very valuable and has been super helpful for me as I sat on committees and interacted with constituents. You have 3 basic groups of individuals that you kind of are responsible to, or you have to interact with as a legislator. Number 1, and most important, is your constituents. Okay, these are the people who have elected you. That in the case of the people who serve in the House, that's about 40,000 people. And so the city that I live in is called North Salt Lake, and that's probably 15,000. So it's a little town, North Salt Lake, and then Woods Cross, and part of Bountiful, and West Bountiful. All of that group kind of makes up around 40,000 people. And these are the people who you answer to. They call you, you take the call. They email you, you answer the email. And one of the things that has been really important to me is constituent outreach. And so for me, from the very beginning, I've had a nightly blog during the legislative session that I write and just kind of fill in sort of a behind the scenes and what's happened today and what's going on, and maybe something in the committee, maybe something in a committee that I didn't even serve on, but it has been interesting and a salient point. And so I write this nightly blog. I honestly have no idea how many people read it. Probably less than a dozen, I don't know. Maybe nobody. Even my own husband, I'll say, hey, how'd you like my post yesterday about, prison relocation? He's like, are you kidding me? I am not reading this. And so I don't know how many people read it, but it's there. The point is that it's there, and it's an attempt to keep people involved if they want to be. So I have the nightly blog. I have a weekly legislative newsletter that gets sent out to people, and realize we don't have staff, so this is just me cooking this stuff up on my own. And I have gotten better at my newsletter, but it is not professionally done, and frequently I'm wishing that I could, ramp up the whole thing and make it slicker and nicer, but it's very organic and very exactly what it is. I just happen to be your legislator right now, and this is me trying to present information for you, and if you want to read it, great. So we've got the nightly blog, we have the weekly newsletter, and then about 6 times a year during the legislative session and throughout the rest of the year, have town hall meetings where anybody can come, and it's sort of like open mic night on suggestions or complaints or opportunity for people to give input. And then every Saturday morning during the legislative session, I have a bagels and briefings day at my house in my living room, and just open it up to any constituents who want to come and talk about whatever the issues are that have been happening that week, or kind of bigger picture things. And we have bagels, of course, because who doesn't love that? And it's been a really great opportunity to invite people in a very non-threatening, homey setting, and just listen. That's the number one group of people that you're responsible to, is your constituents. And how can you know what they want if you do not outreach to them? And the only downside of outreach is you get an incredible number of emails. So this can really number in like the hundreds. That is not an exaggeration. Every day, hundreds of emails. And every person who writes you an email, they've had to find your email address somehow. They've had to try and figure out what they want to say, try and put their thoughts together. And they're not writing you just willy-nilly for fun. They're writing you because they're passionate about what they've written you about. And you need to be respectful of both their time that they took to outreach to you, as well as their opinions and their recommendations and input. Second group that you have a responsibility to is your colleagues. So you've got 75 people. In order to pass a bill out of the House, that means you need 38 votes. So you've got to find at least 38 like-minded people on every bill you have. And you could end up aligning with someone on one issue, and then on the next issue, they're adamantly debating you vigorously against what your view is. You have to learn to take with grace the opposition and the negativity that comes your way, because the very same person who you're against on one issue may be your very person you need to swing a vote on the next bill that you're running. So your colleagues become extremely important, and their perspective's important too. There are many times when I've thought to myself, boy, I'm glad I don't live in such and such neighborhood or such and such city, because I don't think I align politically with the folks who live in that area. But guess what? The person they elected does, and that person owns the rights to be seated in the state legislature every bit as much as I do. And that's really, again, one of the beauties of that process. And then the third is all of the people, the third group you have responsibility to are state agencies, other branches of government, lobbyists who work to help educate you on a particular issue. All of those individuals end up being extremely important in helping broaden your understanding and give you a different perspective in a lot of ways than you may have had initially on the issues. I want to share with you some things that I have learned since I've been in the legislature. So this is 6 years, and I'm going on my 4th term, I guess, in January. First of all, be bold and take risks. It's a risk to put your name on a ballot. I have gained an incredible appreciation and respect for anybody who puts their name on a ballot for anything at any time, even if I would never vote for them in a million years. It's a risk to see somebody at the grocery store and know that they know this is something I really, really want, and I may not get it, and that might be embarrassing, or that might be humiliating, or that might be scary. Don't be held back by that. Be bold and take risks when you have the opportunity. Second, ask questions, and ask lots of questions. Many of you may end up in a situation where you do an internship in DC or up at the state capitol, and this is a great time for you to find out how things work. Is this something you might want to be interested in? Whether it's government relations or legislative policy or running for elected office, whatever it is, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a little bit like this story of my daughter, the one who, not the missionary, but the next one up, who ran track here at BYU, but when she was in junior high, her very, very first race she ever ran, she ran the mile. And so that's, you go around the track 4 times in that race. And I remember watching her. She's in 8th grade, and she's sort of this tall, like skinny arms and legs everywhere. And she's running the race. She goes around. There are 2 kind of packs of kids. There's one pack out in front. There's one pack out in the back. And Sarah's sort of in the middle running. And pretty soon I see her. She's like gone up to the, sort of jogged up to the group that's in the front. And I can see from the stand, she's like talking. And then I see her sort of shrug, and she comes back, and finally gets back to where the little backpack of kids is, and there's sort of another little discussion like this. And I cannot figure it takes like the whole straight on the back side of the second lap that this is happening. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm thinking, maybe we didn't explain what the point of track was very well. You just, go fast, turn left. I mean, it's not that hard, really. And then all of a sudden you see her just go out like to lane 5 and just blast past the first group of kids and ends up winning the race by 200 yards or something. So that was super fun. But at the end of the race I said to her, what was going on? What were you doing? It was kind of an unusual approach you took to that race. And I just, kind of different. And she said, well, I just wasn't sure what the rules were. So I ran up to the first group and I said, hey, what are the rules for passing? And they didn't even say anything to me at all. No one even answered. So I figured I'd go back to the slower girls because maybe they were nicer because they're slower. And still they didn't answer either. So finally I thought, well, no one can get mad if I just go out to lane 5 where I'm not even close to anybody and just run. And so I just did. And I thought at that point, ask questions, get information before the race so you can run the right race, okay? The importance of asking questions. Number 3, remember who you are. There's a lot of, when you're in elected office, there are going to be a lot of people who come up and tell you how wonderful you are. The good thing is there are equal number who tell you how terrible you are. So that's awesome because you can choose, which group you want to listen to. But it's really important that you maintain your sense of self and who you really are. When we lived for a year in Alabama, and we had 3 kids when we lived there, and one of the very first days that our kids came home from school, so this is our son who's actually now one of the graduate assistants with the football team here coaching, he came home from school and he's like, Mom, oh no, it was our daughter, it was our older daughter. She came home and she said, Mom, I have to know who we're for before I go to school tomorrow. I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, who are we for? I said, I don't even, what do you mean, Annie? She said, who are we for, Alabama or Auburn? I cannot go to school tomorrow before I know this. And I thought, well, I frankly have no idea, nor do I care. So my son was there, he was a kindergartner. I'm like, Matthew, who should we be for, Auburn or Alabama? So he chose on whatever knowledge a 5-year-old had, and we became Auburn fans that year. And that has stuck, anyway, we had a sad Saturday last week, but anyway, so we're all based on, his analysis here. But what that did, declaring who we were for at that point, made all the difference. Socially, of course you have to get the sweatshirts, then they sat with certain kids in the lunchroom. They didn't have friends on certain whatever. But it became, because football is serious business in the South. I am not kidding. It's big. And this was a very important distinction. But it's equally important for us in our lives, just in general, to remember who we're for. Whether that is for, are you, in the political world, there's a fair amount of gamesmanship, a fair amount of politicizing of things. Is that what you're into? Are you into making good policy? Are you into representing people? Are you into trying to make things better? And to remain true to who you are in your core, that's really important. Remember who you are. 4, the experiences that you've had in your life will matter, and they will help you as an elected official. So I thought I would list a few of the jobs I've had and how they have helped me in the legislature. So first I'll start with mom. And as any mom knows, being a mom, you have to have a lot of tenacity. You have to be tough on discipline. Of course, there's love, but you have to, be able to really ride watchdog on shenanigans your kids may have, and be a good negotiator and help prioritize things. Those are all skills that parents have. I mean, dads too, but parents. Worked for a while as a family therapist in a former chapter of life. And when you're in family therapy, one of the things you do is you sit around in a big group and you listen to everyone's concerns, and you and you validate, and you listen, and you try and problem solve, and you try and cooperate together. This is not so different than one of my very first meetings with a group of stakeholders and individuals associated with a bill I was trying to pass on electronic scrap recycling. And we'd had honestly dozens of meetings on this issue, and there were people from industry and environmental advocates and all these different stakeholders, and just sitting around, talking ad nauseum. And finally I realized, this is not a family therapy session. I am a legislator, for Pete's sake. And finally I just said, you know what? I'm done listening to all your complaints. No one's leaving this room until we get a solution, and we only have the room for 10 more minutes. So let's just cut to the chase and get on to the problem solving. And you know what's crazy? Within 10 minutes, we had a solution. Honestly, but to get to that point took a lot of time and skills that I had garnered as a family therapist, actually. I'll tell you 2 experiences in the church that have helped me. My husband and I are serving right now as inner city missionaries at the Salt Lake County Jail. It's the Oxbow County Jail, and it's the jail that has primarily those individuals who have committed crimes associated with substance use. So maybe there's theft and stuff, but mostly like DUIs or possession charges, things like that. So you'd think, what am I going to learn in that setting that would help me as a legislator? I'll tell you what I've learned, a lot. It's opened my eyes to a completely different population than I was familiar with previously, and opened my eyes to a lot of issues that are really politically hot right now. Number 1, criminal justice reform. Huge issue in the state right now. We're thinking of moving the prison from the point of the mountain to another location. They just announced the final 6 spots, one of which is actually just in my district, so I'm getting emails on that. Some people super happy, some people unhappy about that. Anyway, learned a lot about the criminal justice reform from the inside. What's not working? What doesn't work when a criminal gets out, when an inmate is released at 2 or 3 in the morning and there's no place for them to go? Because now they're a felon, they can't get housing, jobs are hard to come by, and they have no money, and they have to pay for their own drug tests. These are real life challenges that inform my perspective on criminal justice reform and on transportation issues and housing, social services. And I would not have that perspective if I were not serving in that calling right now. That's something that I can help educate my fellow legislators on. That's helpful. Being a Relief Society president was helpful. Why is that? You spend a lot of time in people's houses. So think about this as you're all visiting teachers and home teachers probably. You get an opportunity to sit in someone's home every single month and listen to, in a perfect world, you're listening to the things that matter most to them, right? And what you're getting is a window into someone else's soul, into their heart. What are the issues that they're struggling with? How can you help them? Now, sure, that's in, within a religious kind of a setting there, but that opportunity to really put yourself in someone's shoes, that's real, and that's a skill that a lot of people don't have if they haven't been practicing that for the past 20 years in their life in that type of a setting as a home teacher or visiting teacher. Just telling you, every single experience that you have in your life, whether you think it is a direct line from A to B, and that's what your trajectory is, and whether you thought back in, when you were 10 or 20 even, you're sitting here in this class and you think, yep, I want to be in the state legislature and I've got it all mapped out and I've got these 10 steps and boom, I'm elected by the time I'm 40 and life's going to be great. Or if, like many people, you think, all right, I think I'm going to follow this path, but life happens, and so you kind of take like a little circuitous whatever, and then an opportunity comes up and you think, okay, I'm going to give that a shot. I want to be involved. So if any of these sound like you, this is a career for you. Okay, are you bossy? If you're bossy, don't feel embarrassed. It's a good quality. And just think about it in your own. You don't have to answer out loud. If you like to tell people what to do, this is the perfect job for you. Because a lot of people won't listen, but sometimes they do. So if you like to be in charge, there you go. If you're curious, as in Einstein, where he says, I'm an average person, I have no special talents, I'm only passionately curious, if that's you. If you can't pick up a magazine or click through, on the Washington Post every day and every article sounds interesting to you, if that's you, this is the job. Because you will be discussing and learning about everything under the sun. And it is so interesting. I'm telling you, transportation and roads, it's cool. Who thought? Who knew? And that was something I had no interest in before being elected. And it is so interesting because you see it all come together and how it really impacts people's lives. Do you like working with people? Is this something that's interesting to you? Do you like working in groups? Do you like solving problems? If someone says, this isn't working, do you like puzzles? Do you like trying to fix things and make things better? When my kids were younger, they were in 4-H, and one of the themes from 4-H is good, better, best, never let it rest, till good is better, and better is, there you go. Former 4-Hers in the group, maybe? Or you just guessed it because it rhymes. Anyway, if you like any of those things, or you like policy, you like to make a difference, this is a job that can be very interesting to you. And I guess my main message I'd want to give you is that we in America depend on elected officials. We have a political system that is extremely unique for the rest of the world, and it depends on regular people, just like all of you, who at some point in your lives think I would do this for a chapter in my life. It's not going to be something you do for 30 years, contrary to some people who are in politics. It may be a short chapter, it may be 2 or 4 years, it may be 10 years, whatever it is. But if you think that might be interesting to you, I want you to know we need you. We need your voice, we need your perspective, and America needs you. I don't want to sound like super dramatic or we ought to pipe in the Star-Spangled Banner or something, but I, with all fervor, need to express to you that it's really, really important. And in our state, especially being a part-time legislature, you have an opportunity to step in and make a difference, regardless of your background, and in fact, because of your unique backgrounds. And we depend on you, we need you, and I will not be there for sure by the time any of you decide that you're going to run, but I would love to know that is a path you have chosen. and that's in your possibility. I just want you to know that. So thank you very much for letting me come today. I appreciate your